All right, let's start. Questions? Come on up to the mark, form a line. Try and stand on those two marks right there. We've got to get the camera angle right. Yeah.
Question for any of the panel. How does the law of attraction play into the experiences that you have had?
So the way, and this is just my personal belief, and I just finished reading the law of attraction for the third time, like recently. So the way I perceive the law of attraction to work in all of our experiences, and someone please let me know if this resonates with you, is almost like karmic debt. We all have been here one time or another in this realm or in this galaxy, in the universe, and we all have done or experienced or said something. If you say, I don't want a speeding ticket, if you say, I don't want a speeding ticket, you might not get one today, you might not get one tomorrow, but like next month, something happens, and it's like everyone else is going 105 and I'm going 90, why am I getting pulled, right? Well, you said something here, and so we have a whole line of things of this being taboo and something that should be not heard of or unspoken. And something in our higher selves said, hey, she said this at one point in time, whether it was in another life or whether it was here, let's go and give them that experience. So we call upon all the things that we want, don't want, that we're afraid of, that we love, and it manifests in one lifetime or another.
But with your alien connection,
I think it's a gift.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that, because I do the law of attraction in a little bit different way. And to me, if I were to give you something, what is the first thing you'd say to me? Thank you. If you start with thank you and live your life with gratitude, you'll have anything and everything you need or want.
Really short on that one. I had the opportunity to meet Esther on stage. So I didn't know exactly what I believed or didn't believe about manifesting or how to bring something kind of out of the stream and right to you, so to speak. But when I decided that I needed to meet her to understand the law of attraction, my wife said, okay, well, I'll get you tickets for Christmas. Esther came to San Diego, and in February I walked into an auditorium where I looked a lot different than most of the other people there. They looked more like you. They were mostly white ladies, about my age, very into this. This was the thing they did. The lady I was sitting next to, 10th time there, 10th time trying to get on stage to meet Esther. I had no idea how any of this worked. She was explaining it to me. She said, are you going to try to talk to Esther? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, and she's going to call me up first. And then she did. And then they put it on YouTube. So when she and I were done talking, and just suffice to say that while we sat there, I didn't feel like the guy I am right now. I felt like she and I had peeled something off. We were having a very personal conversation between the two of us. And when we were done, I had the answers I needed, and I walked out of that auditorium and I went home. And like many other things, I put Law of Attraction up on the shelf with the other tools and added it to the whole panoply of life that is what was just said a minute ago. When you start with thank you, when you say yes, when you end with amen, we get what our heart desires. So.
Thank you all for your talks. Thank you so much. My question is, those of you who have had encounters, have you ever considered that rather than an abduction with experimentation or, harmful kinds of things, have you ever considered this as family who is making adjustments so you can remain here to do your missions?
Yeah, I'd like to address that real quick. Contact with non-human entities has happened several times in my life. And my experience in 1977 was kind of traumatic. And I had a lot of anger and a lot of resentment toward non-human entities because I saw them as something that hurt me. But in retrospect, over this last 20 years, I've softened that attitude a great deal. And I think that the injuries that I suffered were more collateral damage than they were intentionally inflicted. So somebody asked me today if I could take back all of this and have it gone from my life, would I do that? And absolutely not. What happened to me is a part of me. So in that regard, I do think they're somewhat like family.
Again, frustrating for me with the hearing impairment, but if I understood the question correctly, in the years that I worked as Bud Hopkins' assistant, I had the privilege of interfacing and spending time with probably several hundred people who seemed to be absolutely authentic in terms of their abduction experience. And in almost every case, a parent was also involved. In some cases, we met with 3 generations in the same family. The famous Intruders case, which was certainly probably Bud's best known one, where Deb Jordan Cabell in Kokomo, Indiana, started to work with Bud. One of the indications that she had was waking up one morning with a small scoop mark scar on, I think, her right thigh. And in discussing this with her mother showed her her leg with the same mark in the same place. We can only make our best guesses as to the whys of their reasoning and their program, but it seems that it is a rule or a guiding principle that they are following bloodlines. And that's simply the way it is. We do our best to ascribe meaning to it, and there's certainly educated guesses we can make, but that is the rule. And in the beginning, we thought in the later 70s, in abduction research when it was really starting, that it would be like being hit by lightning. If you had been abducted by these other intelligences and returned, the odds are extreme that it would never happen again. But the facts absolutely were in the other direction, that this is something that follows familiar relationships.
Do you guys mind if I add to his story, even though I'm not on the panel? Debbie Cobble is a very close personal friend of mine. And she was at my house years ago. We were talking about this stuff, and I knew Bud as well, and I was never convinced that all of the gray alien encounters were horrible, negative, scary experiences. And I was having this conversation with Debbie, and she goes, well, that's how I remember them. They scare the crap out of me. And so she goes, hypnotize me, and let's find out if something else is going on. And so I did. I used to work with abductees back in the 90s, and so we did a hypnosis session on the couch in my basement, and she was going through remembering a recent experience, and all I did was simply ask her, why did they pick you? And she went quiet. She was just chattering under hypnosis, telling all the details she was experiencing. She just went quiet for a minute and started crying. Brought her out of hypnosis, and I said, What happened? And she said, I realized I volunteered and gave them permission to interact with me, and they're my family. And it changed the experiences from her. From that point forward, they were no longer negative and horrible and scary because she realized that she was related and she was a willing participant. Okay?
I'd like to add to that, thank you so much. And if you guys remember from my talk yesterday, with my experience with the Greys, said I wasn't scared when I was on a craft, even though there was a lot of experimentation. But with the other group, the technological group, and I talked about my teacher on the craft, and became Ramadir, who I'm channeling now as an extraterrestrial. Well, what came to me after the book was published, and Ramadir and I have been continuing to correspond, he actually is my father. And that didn't make the book. I realized that after it had been published. So very much family, yes.
Oh, and by the way, if you haven't read Dolores's book, The 3 Waves of Volunteers, do you guys have a couple hundred copies? Everybody should read that book. I don't know how, I can't stress that enough.
What's the name?
3 Waves of Volunteers. It's about hypnosis session that she did with people that realized that they lived in a past life in the alien civilization that was here now abducting them. And there's hundreds of cases, I think, in that book where she shares the data that she found. So, amazing stuff.
I think for a lot of us, there's another piece to it, that there's a willingness to interact with this thing on a voluntary basis. There's something that stands in between in a vestibular way, in the way the body reacts, at least for me. There's something about what we call the uncanny valley, that these other entities have such a similar look to us, but they are different enough that they trigger something inside that immediately triggers your fight or flight. Now, like some people, I have a feeling that this is a consensual experience for me now. In the past, I didn't feel that. I was very angry. I don't consider myself an abductee because, as I said yesterday, all of my encounters like that are punctuated by either sleep or meditation. But I do remember the feeling of being absolutely paralyzed in fear, in fight or flight, not being able to move, not being able to control myself. And the only thing that I can add to that is that if the experience I'm supposed to be having now doesn't normally need this other thing to enter into it, then I'm going to have things built into me to keep those things at bay in case I bump into them when I'm not supposed to. But if there's something that they're able to circumvent, I don't know. But as I said yesterday, I would sure love to get an email, a knock on the door, a telephone call, something like that, so we could maybe have some kind of accord together, instead of this being something I don't understand that's a mystery that I have to transcend.
I'll add one thing that, on reflection, I don't think I have ever talked about in a public forum. It is public knowledge for anybody that's followed my work that I became involved in it almost involuntarily over 40 years ago when I had a return memory of a sighting that I had repressed from childhood with one of my sisters. And she had been taken at that time, and that triggered an obsession and then a career in this work. Bearing in mind that, again, there is this pattern of familial involvement over the years and then the decades, I really didn't think about it in terms of my family. It had happened to my sister, and is often the case with siblings, one is turned off, the other is taken, and that's the history. Over the decades, my dad stayed very interested in the subject. He lived to be almost 100. And he read a lot of the books. He became good friends with Richard Dolan, who lives fairly close. Dad lived through a lot of history. Richard is a historian. He had dinner with me and Nick Pope and Tim Good in London. Travis Walton came to the house to meet my dad because they both had a lot of admiration for each other. And I guess about a year or so before my mom died, 20-odd years ago, we were sitting having a drink, and she said out of nowhere, "You know, I think this may have happened to me when I was a kid." And I remember keeping a very straight face, but feeling almost sick inside, like, what? And of course, immediately realizing, well, this makes sense, but I just blanked it out as something that could have happened to one of my parents. And I said, as analytically and professionally as I could, to my mom with a vodka in my hand, "What makes you feel this way?" She said, "Well, you know, when I was a kid, me and my 4 sisters, we shared a bed. And you get to know your sister's bodies pretty well growing up like that." And I got up one morning, and I think it was Sally said, "What's that mark on your back?" And I said, what are you talking about? She said, it's sort of like a little scoop. And it wasn't there yesterday. And then she said, do you want to see it? And I thought to myself, actually, no, I really don't. I will take your word for it. And I did. And she passed less than a year later, but that's how close it can be. And also, even when you are immersed in this work, how you protect yourself. You have to make certain concessions or you will damage yourself. You will feel beat up. I gave a talk once at Cambridge Hospital in Boston at the invitation of Dr. John Mack on managing stress in UFO work, that of the abductee or the experiencer you're working with, and equally your own stress as an investigator, as a therapist, as whatever.
I just wanted to add to that. I haven't spoken yet, so I thought I'd speak up a little bit. But I found out later through David Marler's research and archives and that, and through my mother, that my grandfather, who was in the Navy and was a Mason in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, witnessed a oblong-shaped craft over Lake Como and was investigated by J. Allen Hynek. And then my mother, my family, and I, when I was young, going from Lake Geneva to our home in Illinois, saw 2 more oblong-shaped crafts, so we have that kind of lineage. And I also find it kind of interesting that so many of our military men and women and their families have people that have contact in some sort of way, as if the ETs are curious about, the psychological mindset of humankind. So I thought that was important. But I'm also leery on calling whoever these are my family, because as you guys know from yesterday, I'm not sure who I'm dealing with here. I just want to send out I'm not positive who it is I'm contacting. Maybe you can help me with that. So I'm a little cautious when I do that. I would just like to say that I think all of you should be too, because you never know exactly who you're dealing with.
So I think I've heard everyone here speak about the difference between intent and consent. Those are 2 very different things. And Terry, I have a question for you, I guess, in this sense. With your experience in law, of course, this being outside of you giving us legal advice, do you see a way forward with the courts? Is there a path forward with new technology and new processes of discovery? Do you see anything?
That's an interesting question, because you wonder how do we impose terrestrial law on ET? The first obstacle is going to be service of process. But if that can somehow that problem can somehow be cured, if they have a base here or something where there's somebody who's permanently, like a corporation has a resident agent, ET could have a resident agent who accepts service of process. And, could we take ET to court under our laws? I just wonder there's a jurisdictional issue too. If it happened in the United States, do they have jurisdiction? Is the UN involved somehow? But if they're going to be active and open in our community, in our life, in our culture, I think they're going to have to accept some of our law and some of our just rules of how we live, ethical treatment of one another. If we don't have that, I think we got a big problem. But yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for a fabulous weekend. Mine's a nuts and bolts question of how the objects actually interact with Earth, space-time, environments. I'm trying to correlate, I love cosmic consciousness. I feel like we're all connected. I love oneness, I'm all about it. But I'm trying to correlate some cases where there are specific traits or characteristics that I'm very interested in. The dust rings, particular. Objects have been reported to have dust rings or leave behind a trail of smoke, what looks like smoke or dust or particles. And then one of the other characteristics that has my attention is frequently reported the object was hovering or was sighted, moving around, floating, but turned dramatically, changed colors, or it was a change of orientation, and then, as Sean taught me a new word yesterday, zorched, and which I love. But I would just like your thoughts on those, any experiences with those, or thoughts.
The dust is probably dust. The smoke is probably smoke. We shouldn't go too far down the rabbit hole trying to figure out things that seem intuitively obvious. But I think what you're asking is why. Why would something so advanced go through a phase change, a modality that's going to need to do these things? Pure speculation, but when we look at dust and electrostatic things, you discharge something, it's going to leave the dust behind. Ablation, fuel dump, any kind, if there's any kind of steam, I mean, we still use steam today. Most folks think, oh, it's a nuclear aircraft carrier. It's still a steam turbine. It's just, how are you heating up the water? We don't know yet how all these are working. We don't know if they're all working on the same principles and things. But I think that we should give ourselves a little bit of credit. We're the only advanced species we're 100% sure exists. And we've done some pretty cool things. We shouldn't always assume that what we do is not going to be a part of what they do. There's going to be things that we should recognize. Where I think that we may be making some mistakes in trying to observe these craft and understand them is that we have decided there are aspects in our fundamentals that, even though we're not sure of them, we've said they are, we give them the big thumbs up, and we keep trucking with them. It's time to start cracking those fundamentals open again and saying, we're seeing things that are breaking those fundamentals. It's time to attack the math in a different direction. Forrest and I have been talking about that for the last 3 nights with a lot of his hypotheses and some other panel members and I. And it seems like a lot of people are aiming in the right direction. The question is does the technology lend itself in a way that can be explained to the average person, or do those fundamentals end up being so simple that maybe having them secret is very important?
Let me take a stab at that. You talked about objects as they change their shape and their orientation. Something I've been thinking about, and Sean and I talked about it earlier, is if these devices, and that's a very loose term, that's just a loose label I'm going to use, are from another dimension or a multi-dimensional item. Imagine a stool, and a stool comes down into this second dimension, and you see a little circle, okay? The rest of the object exists in an extra dimension, and then the object rotates like this, and now you see 4 objects. Those aren't 4 distinct objects, those are still part of the same object, and then it rotates upside down. Now you see a disc, and then it elevates, now it's gone. It hasn't gone anywhere. These are all unique aspects of a multi-dimensional object, and that's perhaps maybe why these things can change shape at will, change colors, become 1, 2, disappear, become transmedium and things like that. So, we really have to start thinking outside our box, start cracking our normalcy bias when we start thinking about these things.
I just kind of wanted to add to what Trey and Sean said. I mean, there's so much we are advancing so rapidly, but we don't know how gravity works, and we don't know what dark matter is, and we're still learning so much about quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And something I think about often is, the MUFON has acquired cases since 1969, thousands upon thousands, and we're still collecting that data. And something that's been a passion of mine is, what are we doing with this data? We need our PhDs and our best minds looking at this and looking at the commonalities of colors of lights and these different things and making those connections. And right now it looks like what Trey said, it looks like magic to us because we just don't quite understand yet. But I think we're going to get there, and I'm hopeful it'll be in even our lifetimes that we'll have more answers. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. My question is more about communication. I guess if you look into it, you start reading about like a CE5 technique, and me being new to it, what advice would you give me, or maybe like what not to do? Because I think Katie mentioned, we don't know who we're dealing with. Like if you if you try to communicate, then, I see it as a good thing, but, what advice would you
Well,
give?
my first, this is just my personal opinion here. CE5, first of all, you don't need to pay big money or really any money to go do this. And you don't need a group, you just need yourself. You need to protect yourself, have good intentions, have good thoughts, and just connect into the universe. Just talk. You can even do it in your mind. I really would love a little wink from the universe, and boom, sometimes you'll get that little flash. That's just my personal opinion on that. Anybody else want to talk about it?
I have some pretty strong opinions of this. First of all, Alan Hynek is the person in my estimation that would determine close encounter scales as he invented it. It's not in my opinion that any of us can add to that afterward. That was his scale. If he had come up with that, he would have added it to it. And the reason I say that is because before someone gave it a number, it was called mediumship and channeling. It was called meditation. When you stand up in front of a group and you tell them that you need me to do this, you're making yourself a guru or a cult leader, and you're lying to people. And I'm not afraid to say that. And I think this doves in with what Katie was saying, but I can feel the anger rising in me. I don't like when people are taken advantage of. This is all of our birthright to understand. We don't require anyone to hold our hand and push us towards it.
And kind of to build on what Katie and Sean said, we have used, and I'm going to use the term, so just forgive me, CE5, because it's a label that everybody's familiar with. We're basically projecting intent into the universe and projecting goodwill. And in our experiences, don't craft and don't box in the answer. Don't preconceive what the answer will look like, because in our cases, the answer comes in very unexpected ways, and they're almost, like synchronicity. But be aware if you're using, a technique like this, that the answer might come in many varied, unique forms that, quite frankly, you're not expecting.
Good morning. Thank you for the conference period. This is my first time, and I've learned a lot from you all. Confirmed a lot as well. Terry, my question's for you. Because I'm military, I help veterans file for benefits. So when you're talking about your stay in the hospital.
Hold on one second. Can you move over a little bit and see where the 2 marks are?
Oh, okay.
Because we want to make sure we get you.
All right. So when you were in the hospital and the doctors came in and talked to you, did you ask them any questions about what was on your skin, how it was going to relate to you maybe in the future? Did you get any records when you're getting out of the service? Did they give you any medical records? Was any of that in there? Or the medications they gave you, so you could go back and look at it from their point of view that they might have not told you? I don't know.
Yeah, I've contacted the archive people in writing the way you're supposed to. They're out of St. Louis, Missouri to get copies of my medical records. I have copies of my medical records, and there are holes in them you could drive a truck through.
Yeah. If you don't get them when they're happening, you're not going to get them,
Yeah, and as far as me asking the doctors when I was being treated, they were commissioned officers. I was an enlisted guy. I didn't feel that it was even though it was questions regarding my health, I didn't feel it was proper to ask them. Plus, had I asked them, that would have been a slippery slope to get to contact with non-human entities, and we didn't want to go there.
My personal opinion is being at Whiteman Air Force Base and what's located all and around there, my personal opinion is that General probably had a lot more knowledge than even you had at the time, and they're just curious about what you experienced because of that.
I absolutely agree with that.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay. I've read cases where UFOs have buzzed missile silos and deactivated the nuclear warheads. My question for all of y'all, if this nuclear war between NATO and Russia goes, hot and turns nuclear, do you think they will manifest a greater presence?
I know Bob Jacobs, Dr. Bob Jacobs, who was working in 1964, active duty Air Force, who has the great image of a missile going up in the air and a saucer coming around, and you could see it being zapped somehow. And that happened in 1964, and if you ask Bob, he will tell you he thinks that that destroyed the missile. So I think they definitely have the capability. My question is, would they use that? I sure hope they would.
Sorry to be pessimistic, but I don't necessarily think they'll intervene. Unless we get right to the edge where we're going to destroy our planet, I think they're going to let us humans go as far as we're going to go. And I mean, we've had wars in the past and they never intervened. But when it comes to destroying our actual physical planet of Earth, then maybe they'll intervene. That's what I think.
Could you state your question one more time, just so that I can make sure I am...
This is sort of speculation, but if the war went nuclear between Russia and the United States and NATO, would they manifest a greater presence as far as ET and UFO activity?
The ET's presence is already there. They're the reason for the war. There are some... There's... I don't believe in good and bad, right? But for labels of terminology and understanding, we have the good guys, we have the bad guys. This area, this planet belongs to, is under the authority of the ones that are making the bad things happen. They are going into their minds. They are speaking through them. They are shape-shifting as them. You know, I guess that's that form of abduction, but a lot of the time it is willing. Like I think someone just said that within one of the last few questions. It is a willing thing. They sign a contract, you know. So a lot of our authority is already influenced by the ETs with permission. And so it's not like they've taken over their bodies and they have no control. No, this is what I need you to do. And so they're already there. The good guys, this is not their planet. Imagine being in a prison and then you have people on the inside, right? Those people on the inside can't let you know they're on the inside or it's all gonna go to crap. Right? What they're needing now is for everyone to open their eyes. And the way their presence will be known is if we make their presence known, not the higher ups. We have to be the one that say, hey, we have to allow the space. This is a free will place. They can't intervene without our portion of things.
I wish everybody perceived this as the good guys. I'm not sure yet. I think we probably got a mix. I think nature is red in tooth and claw, and I think it extends far above and beyond us. I think greed and lust and envy and all of those things probably extend far beyond us too. But that said, let me tell you what I see, because we have zero reports of them stopping a nuclear test. So when I hear about how much they care about the environment, I don't see it. Because exploding a nuclear weapon, to me, is the most untenable thing to do in an environment like this. Beyond that, we do have reports of them being around our nuclear facilities and being around our nuclear military assets. We've all heard rumors of that. We've heard recent rumors of that as well. We've all heard rumors of them taking control of those firing solutions in those silos and/or providing difficulties for the technicians operating those places, as well as scaring the hell out of airmen all over the place. Those are intimidation tactics. So all I have so far in this vein with the people interested in, the entities interested in the nuclear weapons and the nuclear capabilities, are intimidation tactics, curiosity, and intelligence gathering capabilities. I don't see someone who gives a damn about my environment or the people.
The question of other intelligences, visitors, and nuclear weaponry has haunted us to a degree for generations. In the 1950s, Carl Jung, a legendary psychologist, published a book called Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the sky. being Carl Jung. He came down on the side of projections of our longing for a new pantheon of gods, small g, plural, to save us from ourselves. And in the same book says, yes, and they're probably visitors from other planets as well. We know from a number of courageous military personnel, one of the best known being Robert Salas, formerly of the United States Air Force, and associates that he has brought forward, that they can set in motion nuclear weaponry, or they can shut it down. And this is documented repeatedly. One book you may want to add to your library is Robert Hastings' great work of scholarships, UFOs and Nukes. I think the great X-Files mantra, I want to believe. So many of us want to believe that these other intelligences will save us from ourselves, and in the process do away with or neutralize all of our nuclear technology. I'm all for it, but I think this is still in the pantheon of wish fulfillment. We live in obviously a very uncertain world, and even more uncertain now in terms of not having mutually assured destruction, which kept us going through the Cold War of, I'm not going to do it, because if I do it, you'll do it, and we'll all be gone. It's a lot of macho posturing. Now we don't have that. So one day to the next, and as President Trump used to say, we'll see what happens.
So in tying all of these things in together, I don't think there's one person being pessimistic or one person being optimistic in this space. I believe that this is a large form of truth. There are layers to all the things. All of the outcomes are true in a sense. And just again, think about someone going to stop something, right? If America wanted to go and stop the war, they would think we're invading. They would think we're invading their country, which is going to produce an even bigger war. It's the same thing with the extraterrestrials. There is already a plan happening here with the ones who rule this planet. If the free will ETs, I have a ET news show where I talk about this. If the free will ETs just come in to make the bad things stop happening, they're going to feel as though you guys are stepping on my turf. You're invading what I own here. So now there's a galactic war. So we have to find ways we are the ones that's going to make a difference in all of the things that are happening. It's one person at a time, whether it's how you broaden your horizon, whether it's what it is that we're learning, what it is that we're teaching, when we go to these conferences, when we do our research. What is the knowledge that we're getting? How can I use that knowledge to make myself shine? How can I use that knowledge to better myself so that I can do my part? And if that is, I've touched this person, I've paid it forward, I've done this. If one person after another in here does that, we have now made this space better for us. Now we go off into our prospective places on what our purpose is, and we go and we fix that there. That's our job. It's up to us. They can help us, but they have to be discreet or it's going to be a galactic war.
Terry, thank you so much for your talk this morning. It really resonated with me in several ways. Like many people here, I know what I've seen. I can only speak about what I've seen, and I need answers to what I've seen. And like you start to wonder, well, somebody built this, and what is their life like there? But more importantly, I'm selfish like a lot of people. Why me? Do you ever feel like, when you had, like Sean said, the Independence Day moment, have you ever questioned and come to maybe any answers for yourself? Why you?
Yeah, that I wondered that a great deal. I mean, Toby asked me that question and it stuck in my mind. And I did wonder why me. And now I don't ask the question anymore. I just accept it that this is the way it is. This has been a part of my life, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And
blessed to have seen it.
what? I'm sorry?
And very blessed and fortunate to have seen it.
Yes, I feel that. I feel very fortunate to have seen it. A lot of people spend a lifetime and never see a UFO or anything, and I've been blessed with seeing them a couple times, so I see it as good fortune.
Had a great time the last 3 days listening and listening to all your folks, all the things that you can share with it. It's been wonderful. I have one question for Christy. Christy, you're an identical twin, correct?
Fraternal.
Fraternal. Oh, okay. I thought it was an identical twin. I'm a fraternal twin myself. I have a brother, or sister, I mean. I forget what you want. She and I were always kind of on the same page, not as probably as close as I've known some identical twins that have been very, one could start a sentence, the other one could finish it type thing. But I just wondered if your sister had some of your gifts.
No. In a nutshell. No, she doesn't, and she doesn't really accept my gifts either.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, next is for the whole panel. Anybody would? It's hard to see if I want to say this correctly. Have any of you had a sense or a feeling that you have seen somebody in the audience that might be a hybrid or visiting us from elsewhere? And I don't mean aisle row 11, number seat 7. Don't point them out. I'm just curious. So that's it, and thanks again.
How high can we count? Yes, I see lots of people who could be hybrids. And to me, the first thing is you look in their eyes, and it's a dead giveaway most of the time. So, yeah, absolutely. How many people attended here? Expound on that? I think a lot of it is just, first of all, being very open-minded to what people say. You're drawn to this for a particular reason, and you don't know why. If something was triggered in your childhood, something was triggered later on in your life, and it's like, I don't know why. All of a sudden, it just opened up a world to me, and you have to study. That's a huge clue that you've had experiences that you are part of a hybrid program. But usually, I can tell by looking in someone's eyes.
Tell me about the eyes.
Well, that's hard to explain exactly. There's the energy behind the eyes more than anything. And it's just, there's a little current or something going on back there that tells me that there's something else besides the human form.
Do you think they know it all the time, or you think they're totally unaware?
I think most people are not aware. Yeah.
It's like she took the words right out of my mouth. That's amazing. I was like, she said what I was gonna say. But absolutely, and even just right before I walked in here, which is why I was a little bit late, I was looking for someone, and I was like, well, did they even exist? Did you see the person that I'm looking for? Because maybe she shaped shit, like where did she go? She just disappeared, and they were like, no, I did see this person, and they started to describe her, so I'm like, I said, she's more than human, and I've seen a lot of it out here, and like she said, I don't think we know. And my question to you, Christy, is there anyone on the panel that's a hybrid? Oh no.
By the way, slit pupils are a dead giveaway. Step up just a little bit on the. There you go. Thank you. Put your arms up. No, I'm just teasing.
I'm looking to normalize this from the human side. I'm a trauma therapist, and so everybody knows about fight, flight, and freeze. The simple explanation is when your consciousness is overwhelmed, your nervous system doesn't know to go this way or to go this way. What happens literally is we freeze. It's called dissociation. The way I explain it to my clients is that Whatever happened in the interim between start and finish, we throw it into cyberspace. We totally forget it. We don't even know what happened. If you were a soldier in Ukraine and you ran over a bomb and your tank blows up, you lose your partner, next thing you know, you're in Johns Hopkins, you're finally released, you go out on the street, you hear a motorcycle backfire, and it puts you right back into the battlefield. That's what dissociation is. We all have dissociated events. I have a client right now, doesn't remember a thing before age 10. That's because she dissociated half of the stuff. Okay, so we have the ability, when you're talking about all of a sudden this stuff shows up, you don't remember it, you don't know, we have the human ability to do that already. Okay, if anybody in here has had a colonoscopy, I hate to admit I'm old enough to have one, what happens is you wake up and you say, when are we going to start? And they say, we're already done. Okay, we have the human ability to create drugs to focus in that place in your brain to give us amnesia. Okay, so this is totally possible from, now what happens when you get abducted and all that? I'm not ready to go there yet, but I know that what we're talking about, these aliens have the ability to aim at the place in our brain that gives us the amnesia, that gives us the forgetting. But what I haven't seen yet is the marriage of contemporary trauma theory with this stuff, because it's run in parallel. It's very, very explainable, at least from the human experience. No, I just want, yeah. Okay, yes, I do. Who can you pull in from a psychology standpoint to start looking at this in parallel?
Yeah. I just want to say this is a topic that I'm extremely interested in, is this disassociation of near-death experiencers and people with trauma in their past. People, I mean, you know, I don't want to get into all my whole story with that, but I had a half-brother who burnt down 2 of our homes, breakout lights, alcoholic father, very violent, a lot of different traumas as a kid. And when we disassociate, I see that a commonality amongst a lot of experiencers and contactees, and I feel like we connect into something out there. Now, there's always the argument that, are you looking for safety? Are you looking for, you know, are you creating these guides to protect and all that? But the experiences are too real and they attach to us for our lifetime, so I don't think that's the answer. But I do think there's something into when we disassociate, we tap and connect into some other realm, and we stay connected to that. So I do agree with you that that is a piece of this puzzle. And another thing, we get hypersensitive when you have a violent person in your life and you need to read their energy when you're little. And you're like, what dad's gonna walk through the door, the one that beats up people or the one that plays games or whatever? You get really tuned into those senses and that energy. And I think that makes people more observant and sensitive and open to these types of experience, both paranormal and UFOs.
It's beautiful that you asked that question. And I like that you made the statement before the question. Even though it was against the rules, it was necessary. Forrest, don't go get her. Let her have that one, okay? Reason why is because that's something I've been seeking, and I can't find it anywhere. For my company, for all of Farsight, all of the girls there, we experience some form of disassociation and trauma, and they put me on the task of finding a therapist, and I'm like, these people are gonna lock me up in a loony bin. I need the right therapist. I'm not telling you what I do for a living. Like, I'm a metaphysical scientific researcher. That sounds real smart and cool, right? They go, what's that? Just Google metaphysics and it's in that realm somewhere. I'm not about to tell you I talk to aliens every day because you're gonna lock me up, right? And so, but we do need this type of therapist, and we need whomever those beings are gonna be to come in ready to fight, to come in ready to be a warrior, to be a soldier for the cause. So if you're out there, we do need you. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that. We need that. How can we, for the therapists that may be out here, for the healers, trauma therapists that may be out here, how can we broaden that so that you guys feel safe in opening the space to the public for that? to people who have these experiences? What's truly needed? Come find me and then answer that question.
Mine's primary for Terry, but anybody else that knows anything about this. I apologize. I was a couple minutes late getting to your deal, so you might have addressed this. But I noticed in the program with all the bios that it mentioned that you had a couple anomalies in your knee. Were they implants? And if so, have you had them removed and analyzed or anything like that?
Those were discovered in 2012. When I retired from the state of Vermont, I moved to Dallas. I get my medical care from the VA. I had pain in my right knee. I had my wife take me to the emergency room. The radiologist found them on routine x-ray. They had nothing to do with the pain I was having. I had what's called a Baker's cyst under my knee. And they're always benign, and they resolve on their own and go away, and you're good as new in 2 weeks. But they did find above my knee a fingernail-shaped square structure above my knee and lateral with 2 wires attached to it. And that's plainly visible on the x-ray. Below my knee, there is a floret pattern of bone, like about that big, right in the center of my calf muscle. And the radiologist said, I've not seen bone tissue spontaneously sprout in the middle of a muscle, much less arrange itself in a symmetrical pattern, so I'm not sure. But because that on x-ray, the thing below my knee that has the floret pattern in the calf muscle, that's bone tissue. That's what they say they can tell by the density on an x-ray, and they won't remove that. The other thing above my knee, I wanted removed right away. And I saw a VA surgeon, and I said, look, I got this thing. He's looking at the x-ray. He's like, yeah, I'd love to take that out. And, I told him I want a forensic protocol, so it goes from somebody's hands to somebody's hands, so no one can say we switched things. And then he said, all you need is a cardiac clearance letter. And I got a bad heart, and I can't get a cardiac clearance letter. And they explained to me that it's a risk versus benefit analysis. If this thing is benign and inside you, the standard of care in the United States has let it lie. That's why we got 50,000 vets walking around with metal in their bodies from Afghanistan or wherever, and they want it out too. But the risk of infection and the risk of having a bad outcome make it not worth it, and that risk versus benefit analysis not worth taking the chance. So nobody would operate on it for me. I'm trying to condense a whole lot of information here. In November of 2017, I called and spoke with a surgeon in Tijuana because the standard of care in Tijuana is way different than it is here. And he agreed to take it out for me as I wanted, with a forensic protocol and people present in the operating room. And within 2 weeks, on November 17th, I woke up and I had injuries to my leg, top of both legs. And I knew that they came and took their thing out. And it was gone. I went to a chiropractor because I couldn't think, where do you go to get an x-ray on demand? And I went and I saw a chiropractor, and he was kind enough to x-ray it for me. So, in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you.
It seems like most of the testimony of people who were abducted as children, when they tried to tell adults, the adults didn't believe them or validate them. I haven't had that happen with any children in my life, but I'm kind of on the lookout for it because I want to be that person that believes them. But I'm also wondering, what would you say to a child? Do you try to comfort them? It's okay, it's safe, when it's probably not really safe, but is there what kinds of things would you say to a child if they brought this to you?
In 2017, my wife and I sat down with our 2 adult children. My son was 42 at the time, my daughter was 37, and we explained that, they knew Dad would have screaming nightmares now and then, but they knew nothing about this experience. And I told them, and my daughter, who's kind of science-driven, she has degrees in chemistry and biology and was going to go to dental school. I wish she had. We could use a dentist in the family. But she, being a scientist, she has trouble wrapping her head around this. And she's married to an engineer, and that makes it even worse. But you know, she's like, you're still Dad, I still love you, we'll still talk every day, you know, and we can just agree that this is something I'm unsure about. And I said, yeah, that's fine, that's all I ask. My son, on the other hand, told me that when he was 13, he saw a gray stick his head around the door frame and look at him when he was in bed. Actually, he was on his feet. He just got up and put his slippers on, was headed to the bathroom, and he saw this gray figure, and it wigged him out, and really traumatic thing. And I asked him, I said, why didn't you tell me? And he looked at me and said, why didn't you tell me? You know? So I'm disappointed that it happened to my children, but I guess that's the way it is.
I would just say I have 5 kids, 2 grandkids, 4 boys and a girl. My youngest son, Tyler, didn't talk for 3 years. He just clicked. So he was on the autism spectrum, and we were learning all the signs. We thought, anyway, but when he was able to communicate, he would call out people by colors and auras, and he had experience with the blue orbs. And I think when a child experiences things as a parent, or if you're an aunt, uncle, whatever, friend, you don't want to feed into it. So I think the most important thing is to listen to them, to believe what they say, but also don't feed it and go, oh yeah, that was an alien and they're watching you, and don't, like, because that's scary for a child. So just listen with an open mind, validate them, maybe tell them to draw pictures, to write if they can write, and love them and say, I'm here, make them feel safe, and that's the best you can do. But I wouldn't feed into any other stories and pretend like you have the answers to it. That's what I do with my children.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a baby who's just a magical creature. He's his own person, but he talks to me often about his dreams, or sometimes he won't tell me, but he'll tell my mom. I don't know to this day why he won't tell me. I don't know, and I ask him and he'll shut down. But he knows that I'm open-minded in this space, and so I think just letting the children, like, say something that lets the children know, if you need to come to me, I'm here. You know, let them know that you are aware of the hocus pocus of things, that you're here. And that you know the existence thereof. You know, we always have that one family member that is a taboo family member. I'm that person. My family has started to accept me as I am now. But in the beginning, they did not. And I think we all have had that, you know? And so just placing yourself in the space of being the, for lack of better terminology, the weird aunt, or the weird grandma, or the weird uncle or dad, right? It's okay to be that. I'm weird all day. And let it be open about it. So as long as you're open and you're confident and you're walking in there, that's how you'll help these children. And with everything that this woman just said, because I do tell my son, he loves to draw. And I said, okay, well, I said, you're a superhero, and you can control your dreams. So next time you have a dream like that, you tell it what to do. He'll listen. They'll listen to you because you're the boss. And I make him tell, oh, I'm the boss. Yeah, I said, not of me though, but you're the boss, right? And now I don't know. He hasn't talked to me more about it, but I did have him draw certain things, and he says that he's not sleeping well at night because he's talking to someone. And I'm like, well, who are you talking to? And he drew a picture of it. It was the Grim Reaper. Since sometimes these beings are communicating with the children because they don't have the, what do you call it? The stoppings. I don't know what. There, thank you. The filters, they don't have the filter. They weren't taught not to believe it yet. So we're taught not to believe it, and then we see it, and now we have to figure that out. But with children, they're closer to the spirit realm. And so they'll see all these things. And after my son drew the picture, every month or week since then, someone I know or someone that knows someone I know has passed. And they were telling him about it. And so now he's panicking. And so I just tell him, you're not gonna die anytime soon. So you don't have to worry about that. It's okay for you to be a messenger, but don't worry about it. So just like she said, just give them that validation, be the open-minded person, be the person that they trust. Like I can't tell my mom for whatever reason my son won't come to me, and I respect that, but he'll go to my mom. Right, so be the one, let them know I'm the one you come to. I don't care what it is. I don't care if I'm asleep. I don't care if I'm in a different time zone. If you need me for anything, and you give them that look, right? They know it. Their spirit knows it, and they'll come to you when you can save their soul.
Thank you. I think that's as important a question as could be asked here. Personally, over the years, I've dealt one-to-one with a number of situations like this, although often transposed, with an adult reflecting back on a time as a child during an abduction where the parent is frozen and the child's reaction is, "Why didn't you help me?" When it's brought up, the parent, who is often an abductee themselves, is riddled with guilt. It can estrange relationships. I remember one, and so case, the word case is so dispassionate when we're dealing with this, but one case that Bud Hopkins had of an adult child who had been completely estranged from their parent because of an incident like this. And the parent happened to be a world-famous film director whose name everybody would know if I said it, which I never will in a public forum. But as adults, they didn't speak to each other. I think, number one, there's no set rule here. As a parent, you have to be as loving and as sensitive to the moment as possible. I can tell you some things that you shouldn't do, which is let your own understandable, immediate anxiety of your kid coming up to you and saying, you know, giving you an archetypical description in their own terms of being taken, or the little men that come out of the walls at night, to simply react telling yourself, I'm being protective here, and saying the classic, oh honey, you only thought it was like that, or you imagined it, or maybe it was something you saw in a movie. That's terribly insulting. And it registers with children profoundly. I can tell you that when, in my own experience, when the memory of my own sighting that I had repressed with my sister, which was also her abduction experience, her first one, at a certain point I literally went into the house, and I know that I'm word for word here because I've relived it in several hypnotic regressions, one with Hopkins, one with an outstanding individual in the work, gone now for many years, a New York City police detective, specially trained in hypnotic regression for the NYPD for criminal investigation, that I go into the house and my mom's at the stove making us lunch, and I say word for word, Mom, Helen and I just saw some things in the skies that look like flying saucers in the movies. I'm 14, but like Leave It to Beaver, 8-year-old 14, very unsophisticated. Years later, when my sister and I sat down with our folks and related this event, my mom didn't remember it, but what she did was she turned and she looked at me. And she looked at me seriously. And I remember thinking, this is the way grown-ups look at each other. And something compelled her not to say anything, which was intuitively such a wise decision. Here I am all these years later, thinking back on it and thinking, what I got out of that was a mark of respect of, I don't know how to answer that question, honey. Sometimes it's a matter of, can you describe it more? Or give them an opportunity to flesh it out. Again, because we love our children and we want to protect them, one of the ways is we shut down. And we don't want to even remotely acknowledge that this is possible, even if we know it is. And again, what never to say is, oh, honey, you just thought it was that. But obviously, that was your imagination.
Thanks you all for everything you've put together. I want to say that probably a common theme for the purpose that a lot of us in the audience are here today for is to find out who they are, what they want, what they're doing, why they're doing it, who we are, where we're from. Lots of questions, right? And we seem to be grasping at little bits of tangible data, lots of bits at intangible or psychic data. But we have also history of Earth here too. We have archaeology and we have a lot of sacred text. For me, I was it was a TikTok video proposing that there were ancient nuclear wars. And I said, how preposterous, right? So it references the Mahabharata. I read through it and it describes, written I think around 600 BC, of a nuclear warhead dropped by a spaceship that destroyed a city into the millions of people from like 9,500 years ago. And then when I read it, the descriptive words were so convincing to me that I thought it was either a psychic from 600 BC that wrote this, which is a very, very old story, older than that, or we've had nuclear wars here. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I realized every sacred book is about ETs. Our Bible, our everything, literally. And Yemi, you guys have done so many reviews at Farsight. I don't think there's a Bible story that you guys have put attention to that doesn't involve manipulation by ETs. Not help, manipulation by ETs. For me, it led to a couple years of really intensive research on everything. And I come from a Christian background, and our evolutionary history doesn't hold up. Our Christian history doesn't hold up. Our Eastern gods, religions don't hold up. But there are pieces that we could reconstruct. And the only thing that makes sense to me, having gone down a couple years, which is a long conversation, is that perhaps that we, not the human, but we, the consciousness, is source. And we are here creating everything we see, and we have two choices. We have the creation we want to create with our self and or peer groups, or we don't know we're creating it, and we have the world at large. And the world at large includes all the ETs from all the resets of the Earth matrix from the beginning. Can you comment on some of those things?
There's a book that my director, Dr. Courtney Brown, read to me. It was the sweetest thing. Every morning I would go into the office and we'd have breakfast and he would read this book to me. It was called The Prisms of Lyra. I cannot recall who it is by. This happened about 10 years ago, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago. And in the book, it referred to Source, God, as I am, in all capital letters. And in the book, I never finished this. It was the smallest book. I have no clue why we didn't finish it. But in the book, it referred to source as I am, and it referred to source, to God, as an alien. And I was confused because, again, strong Christian background, right? My mother's friends called me the snake charmer. They said I could charm the devil back into heaven. That's how. I would leave. I would find a bus to go to church and then come back and preach to my mother. I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to be a preacher, a teacher of some sort. Didn't know it'd be about aliens, but hey, I followed my dream. But imagine a child like that growing up. They say train a child in the way that they should grow, they'll never depart. So it's always embedded in us. What we learn as children are embedded in us. So when I read that, I had already been on my spiritual path, my spiritual journey. My beliefs had started to shift and move and construct themselves the way they needed to be. And as I am still on that journey, as I hope we all are, but when I heard that, I pulled back out of fear, because I said, no, God is God. You can't tell me my God's an alien. And then I had this weird message appear that said, you are God and you're an alien. And I was like, you can't tell me that. Right, so it was a bothersome thing. As you know, in Farsight, we've seen the crucifixion. We've seen what is it that I did? Moses, parting of the Red Sea, the interferences or acts of God with that. We've seen there was another one, the war in heaven, right? I had to ask to stop going to biblical places for a while because it was shaking me until I was able to process it. But as I got older into this craft, I remembered I am. I am is affirmation. I am is the source. I am is omnipotent. I am all these things. I am God. Right, we are source, like you just said. It's hard to explain that when you're a Christian. It's hard to, but if you're a Christian, they say be Christ-like, right? God-like. Therefore, if we are, then we are that I am. And if it is an alien or an entity or a deity or wherever it is that you call it, I call things magic. I'm like a little fairy tale princess girl. I call things magic. A lot of people will call it divine or divinity, right? But I love the word magic. And so whatever you call it, whatever you call the experience, we all have similar experiences, but we call them different things just because of our vocabulary and our knowledge and our age, right? So all of those things. And that's just my thought process on it. And it's about grasping who I am. But that book, Prisms of Lyra, it's a little purple book. It's about this big. And it answers a lot of the questions you just had.
Thank you so much for all of you and you and Nancy and everybody. This has been excellent. You'll have to forgive me. I like to word things very specifically, so I'm going to read my question to you. All right. This is an earth of free will, perhaps for the express purpose, I would assume, of we were supposed to explore. We're supposed to do all the things we want to do when we want to do them in, limits, our 3D limits. But what I observe in just my everyday life is instead of us as humans, as humanity, exercising our free will, we exercise what I have kind of coined free willful ignorance. So my question is, at some point, I feel like the design was free will, and now it's sort of like this free willful ignorance. Because, the things we wanted to explore, they're too scary, they're too confusing, we want to put ourselves in a box, or they're controlled, or they're limited on us in some way, imposed on us some way. And we're like living in this constructed bubble, really, essentially, at this point. What are your comments on when we will move back to true free will, or did we ever really have it?
I think we do have free will. We are a planet of free will. We have the free will to put ourselves in a box. We have the free will to limit ourselves. We have the free will to give our power away to other people. And it's when we finally claim our own power and figure out who we are as individuals and that there is no box, I think that's when we can really claim that it is free will, although it always has been and always will be. We have the free will to contain ourselves. We have the free will to limit ourselves. And we have the free will to change that if we choose.
Where will your free will allow you to go and live without authority? Where can you go on this planet where you don't need a job, where you don't have to submit to another human, or you don't have to earn an income to eat, where you don't have to request to use the bathroom or hydrate? Tell me where that place is. I'll go exercise my free will there with you.
I am cracking up. I'm sorry, I'm trying so hard not to laugh. That was beautiful. We create that place. It's up to us. Exactly. I was just speaking to Sister downstairs about something very similar of I believe we're coming back into our free will by waking up. So that place will come soon. Coming soon, ... right? The place will come soon. I believe that it's there. But like you said, we're choosing to be ignorant about that. Ignorant is bliss. That's not true bliss, though. Knowledge is bliss. It's scary, but it's blissful. So if we continue to do what we're doing, if you continue to ask those questions and then demand the answer from the universe and the people around you, our free will start to open back up. But we have to do it within ourselves. The government they're authoritarians. And so they want to control us. But if everyone breaks free of that control with the free will we've been granted, but we're not using it, we're allowing the control to exist on all fronts. So when do we stop that? That's when Sean will find his place of peace.
I'm just going to really quick comment. I think the younger generation is getting a good handle on this. They're sort of living by their own rules. At least my 20 and my young 30s are. You know, they're immersed in virtual worlds now and work when they want to and don't work when they do. So I just had a comment on that. So maybe we'll see that shift. I don't know where that's leading. It's both good and bad.
I apologize if you already answered this, but I'd like to ask Terry and Sean if they have any, or anybody else is relevant too, if they have a rating for the disability from the VA related to their experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I filed a claim about 8 years ago for low back pain that I think is attributable to my time in the Air Force, as well as tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on how you want to pronounce it, where I sat on a flight line in an ambulance. Now the firemen, they all had these muffs, but we didn't have any. We didn't have that. So yes, I have filed a claim against the VA. I don't really think I can hold them accountable for what happened to me in Devil's Den, because I wasn't on I was on active duty, but I wasn't. Didn't happen on the base. Didn't happen in the course of my doing my job. So yeah.
I'm rated 90% disabled for spinal stenosis, heart disease, hearing loss. I don't know, panoply of other things. I can't tie anything to any experience other than the fact that the phenomenon has scared the hell out of me. That's going to have an effect on your heart. I had a second heart attack this last December, which seemed emotional, although I wasn't living my best life at the time. I had picked up a pack of cigarettes, a bottle of whiskey again. I wasn't very proud of that. So that plays a big deal into it, but it came at an emotional moment. The heartbreak caused the heart attack. my stent from 2012, which was on Friday the 13th in 2012 in the middle of the ocean, just busted. And it would have only been a quick turnaround, 24 hours, put the new stent in, get the heck out of the hospital, and clean yourself up, Chief. But I picked up staph infection. So I spent a good 10 days in the hospital this past Christmas waiting for the staph to go away, and then about 2 months of pushing antibiotics at home through a PICC line. But I can't find a single connection. But I'm the first person to tell you that I think that there is no paranormal, there is no alternate this or that. We are living in a homogeneous reality. We just haven't acknowledged all the aspects of it yet. So, is it related? I believe everything's related. Everything in this universe is moving, and we're all acting upon each other. And so, I don't need to be further compensated or disabled or validated over that, but it wouldn't surprise me if somewhere in there, part of what's wrong with me is related to that trauma of the misunderstanding of whatever this phenomenon is.
I'm not really good with details, but I think this is for the military fellows that spoke yesterday, and they were saying that there was an uptick on UFO activity, I guess, around the Capitol and stuff, and I believe that was like in the late 1940s, 1950s, something like that. And I was wondering if you think that possibly there might be a connection between that and Hiroshima and Nagasaki when we set that off.
Whenever someone asks me if I find a correlation between two things, I say, well, why are you asking me? You're the one that's correlating it first. So I don't, because I can't see why they would wait so long. Why do it the day after Hiroshima, the day after Nagasaki? So I have no idea why they did it. They didn't tell us. That's the thing. These guys don't stop and wait for the cameras. They don't send out an email listing and tell us their intentions. So there's 8 billion of us trying to determine that based on our own observation, our own considerations, our own experience. So I don't mean to throw that back to you to be like snotty, but I would ask you first, because that thought originated from you. So perhaps, but why? They never stopped another one. We've tested so many. Countries are still testing them underground. And we never talk about that. We say, Colonel Salas, incredible case and very important. Nobody's trying to save anybody from anything there. So perhaps, but what was the use of that? What did they accomplish? We didn't change. Why'd they stop?
The testing and stuff, is that more of a controlled thing? Because I know the Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a disaster, it's well known, and somebody was saying something earlier about a tear in fabric. And part of that comes from Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon said through her clients and stuff that when we set that bomb off, that's when the call went out for the 3 waves of 3 volunteers.
Perhaps. My question then would be, who was all the people that were here before the 3 waves of volunteers doing stuff? So that you've got these 3 waves of volunteers that Dolores talks about, but we still got, this phenomenon didn't start in 1947. The clock stopped on the public knowledge of it. We used to call it many different things. This is in our etchings, it's in our books, it's on our cave paintings, it's on the walls, it's in our stories, it's in our dreams and our nightmares. We chose to acknowledge in 1947 that something happened. 3 days later, we chose to renege on that. We pulled back. Everyone in here can still look at the telegram Jesse Marcel's holding in his hand, but that's not the start of the clock on this. It's only the start of the clock on the modern conversation, the 75-year United States military DOD investigation, and all of these things where we're able to now pull data out of an authoritative place and try to plant a flag in it and try to learn something, because those government apparatuses did keep records. They did have things that we can still go back and find. But otherwise, we're still dealing with something that's always been ever present. So I'm very careful to assign motive and intent to something that, in my opinion, is not truly showing motive intent. So I can't draw that correlation. I don't know. I wish, like everybody else, I would love to find out that they already deactivated all of our nuclear weapons. But as I said, we're still testing them. So the arsenal still works, and it's decaying at a horrible rate. There's so much around the nuclear arsenal and where it's at now, how we're going to dispose of it, how we have to dispose of it, because these things don't last forever. They degrade over time. And we have the worst and best ideas of what to do, but when you hear them, it's like, oh, we'll just throw it all in the sun someday. We'll just bury it in this place in Nevada, and we'll put signs up with iconography on them that will tell people for thousands of years, don't come in this area. That's a ridiculous thing to keep doing. So I'm sorry, I kind of digressed there. I can't assign motive to something that won't speak to me directly.
Yeah, just to kind of expand on what Sean said, is some of the most significant explosions on planet Earth were Ivy Mike, Castle Bravo, and the worst was something called Tsar Bomba, detonated by the Soviets. There was nothing stopped those, and they did. Any one of those did significantly more damage to the environment than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. So, you know, what I think, and if you remember, I did the ant and the road analogy, that the ants see a road in the forest, and the road is so alien to them, and I don't mean alien like, you know, E.T., but so strange to them, they can't even fathom what a road is for. I don't think we can fathom what their agenda is, what their purposes is, you know, what their countermeasures against the things we're doing, and we're trying to, you know, take our matrix, our grid of human understanding, human history, human consciousness, and lay it over something that is incredibly non-human. So that's a tough nut to crack, certainly.
Can I add one more?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm really glad that Trey picked that up, because I did want to mention that, you know, like in Lebanon, I think it was in Beirut a couple years ago. That was horrific. It was insane to watch that explosion on the internet and in real time and think what all those people went through, and that could have been prevented. And so I was drawn by the fact that they're not trying to end the loss of life in these horrible, tragic events. They're not so worried about the environment that we can continue testing them. So again, I just see intimidation, control tactics. But let me say too that you said something I found very interesting, because I would consider where we're at kind of on, we still stick to our gumshoe side of the house. We try to stay really pragmatic, forensic, and science-based. But you said something interesting. You said alien, but not ET, because we have taken words in our language like alien, which doesn't mean extraterrestrial. It just means so dang strange that we don't have another word for it, and so outside of our realm of understanding. And we've attached it to that. So when people say, Sean, do you believe in aliens? Hell yes, I do. Do I believe in extraterrestrials? I don't know yet, but that's a big universe, so I think it's a highly likely thing. But thanks, I just wanted to.
I want to ask the panel about the concept of singularity, okay? Because it seems like there are at least two scenarios for a singularity that some people could say could be as happening within as little as 10 years. And the first scenario would be by developing artificial intelligence that got to the capability that it was smarter than the entire population of humanity. And the other scenario for singularity would be when we have a little outer space critter or whatever, you know, speak before the United Nations. And so I'd like to get the panel's thoughts about what you see or what you think about the concept of the singularity.
It scares me. I think that we could be in the future, holding on to our individual or our humanity and giving into AI. So I think that's a real threat, as Elon Musk is so worried about and has been for quite some time. So I just wanted to say that I'm quite afraid of what's coming in the near future.
I'm afraid of it as well. We can wait just a minute.
Okay.
It scares me. I don't know what what I could see in the future is maybe world governments putting their heads together and say, if we're going to have world peace, let's make AI the governing source, and we'll all follow this and live by the doctrine that AI sets up. So, good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I really don't know.
I think we want so much to ascribe meaning, to have the answers. For me, after years, it comes down to we do our best using common sense, critical thinking, deductive reasoning, and trying to keep away from belief per se. Some of us don't have the luxury of belief because we know in our experience aspects of this are all too real. But when you give in just to believing, it tends to romanticize it, mystify it, or kind of make it a mechanical thing. I know at this point, after years of work and engaging with so many people involved in it, one of the things I'm most sure of is how little I actually know that I could bring to a court, that I could empirically prove. I know we're not alone. I know as well as I can know that we are likely dealing with a myriad of other intelligences. When we ask, are they good or are they bad? My immediate response, being a bit of a wise guy, is, are we talking about the good ones or the bad ones? And even that is the wrong question to ask. I'm still filled with wonder. And I think that some of these other intelligences mean us well, that we may have a pre-existing relationship with them going back to our origins. We may be somebody's graduate experiment gone horribly wrong, and they've come back to correct it to get a better mark. I'm only half joking. At the same time, there may be other intelligences that have a pre-existing relationship with this extraordinary bit of dust flying through space that we are being very poor shepherds of. In fact, horrible. The great Walt Kelly, a cartoonist from many years ago, and his wonderful cartoon Pogo. The classic frame was, we as met the enemy and they as us. And they may be just as happy for us to extinguish ourselves and let things start again. As a good friend, Travis Walton, has pointed out, and a lot of us feel the same way, if this was a worst case scenario, we would all know it. We would be down in the salt mines with little Flash Gordon caps on, staring straight ahead, doing their bidding. We don't really know where we stand with them, to what degree they pull the strings, to what degree they move the chess pieces at the highest levels, or for how long. We can drive ourselves crazy with this. I think it's just a reminder also that being human is as remarkable experience as we are going to ever have, and to enjoy it as fully as we can, to engage with this subject, but never let it, at least for a prolonged period of time, eat us up, to always maintain other interests. I mean, some of us have gone through periods of times where we are obsessed with this, but there's so many other things to enjoy in life as well. I could go on, but I know you all get the gist.
Question number one, AI. Yeah, it worries me. It worries me. There's a fantastic old movie called the Colossus, the Forbin Project, and it's about an AI system that was designed, and all the weapons of the world were turned over to this massive AI, behemoth. And it quickly discovered that it could impose its will upon the human race because they had linked all logistics, everything into the system. And the issue that came out is the logical decision is not always the ethical decision. And that worries me. If AI could be done at a completely air-gapped server and couldn't get out, by all means, continue research. But that genie's already out of the bottle, okay? So we just need to be very vigilant, on where this thing leads us. Number two, the aliens, and Sean talked about alien. Don't think about E.T. in an intergalactic Cadillac driving around. Their agendas are so different, and they might be completely apathetic towards us. They could maybe care less about us, much like we don't consider ants when we're eating a picnic. So what does that mean? And to kind of dovetail, segue off of what Peter said, let's just love one another, okay? Let's enjoy our time on this planet. I told my staff when I was in Afghanistan, we're experiencing something very unique in our lives. Let's enjoy the friendship and the camaraderie and try to make something out of a bad situation. So, that's kind of my advice is, live, love, learn, and get on with it.
That was really nice. I'm going to mess that up. A little back of the envelope calculation here. Correct me if I'm wrong. We've got a lot more apocalyptic prophets than we do apocalypses. We've got plenty of other millenniums that have passed before where we expected great change. We take the word singularity today from the idea of a technological singularity, which we take that word singularity from cosmology and a black hole. A singularity is a point of no return. It feels very personal to all of us where we are right now, but these singularities happen all the time. The Bronze Age collapse must have felt like quite a singularity at the time. The Dark Ages must have felt like quite a singularity to the people at the time, a point of no return. The Great Flood, whatever that was exactly in our myths, must have felt like the absolute end of the world, because that's how we wrote it in our traditions. And yet here we are today. I believe that the Hindu Puranas and the other ancient Hindu texts tell us that we live in a cyclical universe. I think we're all living in it. I think we've all been here back and forth, up and down. I know those of us in this room, we probably all share different faiths, different foundational ideologies on how this works. But the one thing that all those faiths share is that somehow we're all still immortal spiritual beings. We may have different waypoints where we stay. We may have different goals of where we want to spend the night in between. But I wouldn't say fear the singularity. I would say embrace the experience. Enjoy your life. Love your people.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming up and asking your questions. They were awesome and lucid and definitely sparked some responses from our experts up here. And thank you guys for sharing your insights and your opinions and your research with all of us. And I would like to say this conference has probably been one of the more extraordinary ones of these, for sure, because we're going to another level. And everybody touched on this, whether it was on purpose or not. This was very nuts and bolts conference when it first started out. And Lou, who ran this thing for many years, tried to kind of keep it that way, even though he was as welcome to talk about weird stuff as anybody. But he felt a responsibility to educate us and the public in a particular way. Well, the lid's off this thing. Everybody's talking about that. It's different now, because we spent a lot of time in the old days trying to make people believe in the possibility that aliens were real. And a long time ago, we didn't even really talk about abductions and stuff. It took a while to get to that. Well, now, thanks to our government, they put the stamp of approval on UFOs are real. So now what are we going to talk about? I don't have to prove that to anybody anymore. The government did. Okay, so now we got to talk about the next aspect of it. And guess what? We're going to march right into consciousness and extra dimensions and the past lives and all of that. It's time to talk about what we're talking about. And I know you guys felt it because, Sean, how you talked about that the experience here changed what you were going to talk about. And I think that you're going to see a change in researchers and what they're talking about going forward. And it's not going to be as much nuts and bolts. If it is, it's going to be much more specific about like how do they really fly, not just it must be anti-gravity, but have we figured that out? 'Cause those are going to be kind of cool talks because I love the physics stuff. But as you can see, our personal connection to this phenomenon is the next step. It's the next thing to understand. So, with that being said, we'll see you next year.